Yeah, so we got a lot going on. So download the app. Best way to stay connected. You can get on our social media accounts if you need to, if you want to. But we got a lot going on. Download the app. It's free if you come to Journey. Well, it's free for everybody. I shouldn't say if you come to Journey. It's free for everybody. Best way to stay connected. Sign up. Do all that stuff. The senior group we're starting. We got to come up with a better name than that because it sounds awful. But I will tell you, and this is bad of me. I wanted to make sure you guys could connect. So there's a table out there with some flyers out there for them getting together. And to make sure you guys found it, I put some Werther's Originals out there too. Just sniff them out or whatever. So anyway, so I'm just kidding. It's a joke. But so we're so glad you guys are here. We already had a great first service, and we're glad you guys braved the weather to be here with us today. Like I said, lots of stuff coming up we want you to get connected with and involved in if you can. So we have been going through this series talking about newness and newness of life and stepping into a new year and goals and all these things. And we've been talking about this. We've been talking about transformation. We've been talking about the renewing of your mind. We talked about how God is interested in making your life better, but he wants to make you new. Last week, we talked about like how the mind is the battleground for this. We talked about metamorphosis. We'll talk a little bit about it again today. And God doesn't just want to polish the old. He wants to create something new from the inside out. And so last week, we really focused on our minds, how we think, what informs you. Now, here's what I want to say about everything we've talked about, including last week and what we're going to talk about today. So, maybe you've been to church or you've been to a sermon or maybe you've read a book or heard a motivational speech or whatever, and maybe that message landed with you in some way. Like you connected with it, you felt it, you nodded a little bit, you wrote something down, you left a little bit inspired. But here's what I've learned about moments like that, or moments like maybe today, or moments that we've all experienced where we felt a little bit of inspiration. Inspiration is powerful, but it's also temporary. It doesn't last very long. Eventually, the feelings fade and the real test of change begins. So, for example, like for us, maybe this going into this new year or new season or whatever it is, we feel motivated, we feel inspired to make some changes or to think through some things in our life. But then the alarm goes off on Monday morning. The same pressures show up, the same patterns tug at us, the same voices continue to inform us. And all of a sudden, the excitement of stepping into something new starts to feel really heavy. Last week, we didn't talk about it because I was saving it for today, but there was actually a holiday that most of us probably missed, and it was on January 9th of this year. And January 9th of this year, and it happens every year on the second Friday in January, is what they refer to as National Quitters Day. And the reason they call it that is because what they found through study is that most people that make resolutions, by the second Friday of the year, they've already quit, right? It's the day most people abandon whatever resolutions they may have made. The gym starts to thin out, and thank goodness, Planet Fitness in Shepherdsville was starting to get rough, all right? The diets loosen, the budgets bend, the goals quietly get shelved. It's the day that most people say, you know what, I had good intentions, but I tried, I meant well, but this is just harder than I thought. And the truth is that anytime you try to invite something new into your life or do something or change your thinking or go to the gym or eat better or change a spiritual habit or change a relationship or work through the hard things in life, the truth is that quitting is very easy. You just stop doing it. You just say, you know what? I'm done. And here's the thing. Most people, I don't think, quit because they don't care. I think most people actually do care and have good intentions. And most people, even when they start to kind of step away from it, again, it's not because they don't care. It's because of a couple of different reasons. For some of us, let's be honest, it's because we're tired. Right? Like we tried, but it was a lot of work or a lot of effort or it took up a lot of time and now we're tired. Or maybe we quit, as we've talked about before, because the progress feels really slow, right? It's not going at the pace that we hoped it would go. We quit because the change feels painful. Right? Like sometimes when you change things in your life, especially habits or something like that, like it can be really painful to have to go through those things, to make those tough decisions, to clean out the time in your calendar, to show up at the gym, to do all of that. Muscles feel weak, salads are gross, whatever your excuse is, but it feels painful to kind of go through that. We quit because the waiting wears us down. Like maybe it wasn't just 2 weeks. Maybe you're already almost a month into whatever you're trying to do, or a season into what you're trying to do, and the waiting starts to wear us down. But I think the reason is, all of those reasons, is we quit because there's a gap between where we were and where we hope to be, and we find ourselves in that gap, and the gap seems overwhelming. It feels like it's just taking forever. It feels like it's being delayed or deferred or whatever it is, and there's a gap there, and sometimes that gap can be mentally difficult to overcome. Proverbs, the book of wisdom, says it pretty plainly. It says this: hope deferred makes the heart sick. And what that means is we go into these seasons, we go into these ideas very hopeful, but then because there's this deferment, because there's this delay, whatever it is, it kind of slows us down. It makes our hearts feel kind of weird, or our minds feel weird, and we step out. And some of us know exactly kind of what this feels like. Like you hoped your relationships would be better by now, but they're not. You hoped your anxiety would be quieter by now. You hoped your faith would feel stronger by now. You hoped your habits would feel different by now. You hoped your prayers would have been answered by now. And when it doesn't happen and this deferment goes on long enough, something happens inside of us. We don't usually say, at least I don't think most people say, I'm just giving up. We don't just say that. Maybe some of you are like, I'm done, I quit. All right, but we quietly lower our expectations. Maybe for some of us in our faith life, we stopped praying bold prayers. We stopped expecting real change, and we stopped believing sometimes that God will intervene. We saw a story a couple weeks ago about Paul, and we're going to hear a story today about where God kind of intervenes in this moment, and it's just like this amazing moment. But because we didn't have kind of one of those situations, we stopped believing that God is working in those things sometimes, and so we quit. And I think quitting sometimes looks different than just stopping. I think for some of us, it turns into this subtleness of we just settle. We just decide, we talk ourselves into it's not that bad. We talk ourselves into these things. And I think for some of us, the reason we settle when it comes to these things that we want to change or do better in our life, and we decide to go back to the old way, we settle because settling feels safer than hoping again. Settling feels like it's manageable. Settling feels like, oh, well, if I lower my expectations and I reach those lower expectations or get close to those, it's at least better than having these big dreams and not fulfilling them. But I want to challenge you that I don't believe that settling is what God created you for. So I was looking over my message this week, and I happened to be watching a movie. And in that movie, and I promise you, this was completely out of coincidence, but I was watching this movie, and there were a couple things that we're going to talk about today that made me really resonate in this movie. Now, the movie I was watching was a movie called Shawshank Redemption. If you guys have seen it, just a little heads up, I'm going to ruin it for some of you today. But if you haven't watched it yet, it came out 31 years ago, so I feel like there's been a grace period there. And so if you haven't, tough, okay? So top 3 movie for me, top 3 movie of all time: Braveheart #1, Tombstone #2, Shawshank Redemption #3. If you don't agree with that list, it's okay to be wrong. But came out 31 years ago, so you've had some time. But there's this moment in Shawshank Redemption. If you don't know, it's a movie about these guys that are in prison. And one of the characters in this movie is a guy named Red. He's played by Morgan Freeman, and he has been in prison for most of his life. He's learned how to survive. He's learned how to manage disappointment. He's learned how to keep expectations low because he's spent so much time in there. And you see this play out. And he does well in prison, but the line, "you're doing well in prison," isn't what we all want to say in our story, okay? So he's doing okay, but he's lowered the expectations. And you see this, there's these moments throughout the movie where he goes up for the parole board, and he gets getting his thing stamped, rejected, 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 even though he's actually trying to change who he's become, and in some ways we see that he has. But he's lowered his expectations. And then comes along Andy. Andy is played by Tim Robbins, and he comes along, and he is the only innocent man in Shawshank. He has been falsely accused of something, and nobody believes him at first, but we find out in the end that he actually was innocent. Again, if I've ruined it, it's been 31 years. You should have went to Blockbuster, okay? So Andy, he keeps holding on to freedom. He keeps holding on to this belief of a life beyond the walls. He talks about the scene at an ocean. He keeps talking about redemption. And he keeps talking about hope. In fact, there's this scene where he plays this music across all of the prison yard, and he gets thrown into the hole for that for like 30 days. But when they ask him why, he tells them, he says, listen, they can take everything from you here, but they cannot take your hope. And when Red hears this, his friend, played by Morgan Freeman, he doesn't want to hear it at all. And he doesn't want to hear it not because he's cruel, not because he's even bitter. He doesn't want to hear it because he's tired. Tired of dreaming, tired of believing, tired of hoping for something that might never come. And there's this pivotal scene in the movie where another guy named Brooks, who's been there for an older gentleman that's been there for a long time, he eventually gets released. But because he's gotten so used to being behind the walls and the prison cells and not holding on to hope and having anything to hope for, eventually he gets released, but he's lost his hope in something better, and so he ends his life. And there's this tension when they find out between Andy and Red. Andy wants to keep holding on to hope, and Red doesn't want to have anything to do with it. In fact, Red goes as far in the scene, and he says this. He says, hope is a dangerous thing. It can drive a man insane. And here's what I think he means behind this, and maybe something some of us will relate to when it comes to this idea of why he would say that. Hope sometimes hurts. Because you're hopeful for something, and then as we've talked about the deferment or the delay or it not always working out or it taking longer, it hurts sometimes to keep holding on to that. Hope maybe reminds you of what you don't have. Hope keeps you longing for a life that maybe sometimes you feel like you might never touch. And when you've been disappointed long enough, you stop wanting to feel that ache. And so hope becomes dangerous. So you shut down. You build emotional walls. You numb your expectations. Some of us even convince ourselves that we're fine with less. We settle. And in the deepest of our hearts and our minds, we're not actually okay with those things, the status quo or whatever it is going on. It's because we don't want to be crushed again. And so we give up. We lower the expectations. We settle. That's sometimes what hopelessness does. It doesn't always show up as despair. Sometimes it shows up as acceptance of the way things are. We talked about this last week. Sometimes it's a resignation of believing that something could be better. It sounds like this. Well, this is just how my life is. This is just my anxiety. This is just my story. This is just the way my family is. This is just who I am. And we settle with those statements being okay. And when hope dies, something else dies with it. Visions die, dreams of a better future die, courage to step into the future dies, and sometimes our faith gets quieter. We stop asking God for big things. We stop believing for healing. We stop expecting restoration. Hopelessness doesn't just steal joy, it also steals movement. Because when you've lost hope, sometimes you just stop trying. You stay in prison. You stay in the pattern. You stay in the past. And over time, if you do this enough, you convince yourself that settling and lowering expectations and staying is actually wise. That's what Red had done in this movie. He's convinced himself that where he is and the circumstances, that it's wise for him to stay in those expectations. But it's actually not wisdom to not believe, to not hold on to hope. It's actually sometimes fear. It's self-protection. It's the soul trying to survive disappointment yet again. Red wasn't wrong in his understanding. Hope is risky. But the alternative is this. Hopelessness is deadly. Hopelessness is where people get trapped. Hopelessness is what convinces people to quit time and time again. Hopelessness is what keeps people from stepping into something better when Jesus says to get up and to walk. And that's where the enemy fights so hard to kill our hope. If he can convince you nothing will ever change, then you'll never try. If he can convince you your story is over, you'll stop trying to write new chapters. If he can convince you that God is done, you'll stop listening when God calls. Hopelessness turns prisons into homes, mats into identities, chains into comfort. And God did not create us to live that way. See, most of us in this room will never find ourselves trapped behind the bars of a prison, giving up hope. But we can find ourselves in a different type of prison, a prison of our mind, a prison of our heart, a prison of our behaviors, and a prison of our past where we feel just completely stuck. In the Bible, there's this interesting story that we've covered before. So if you've been around, you've probably heard this. It's one of these interesting stories that I keep coming back to because there's some details in there that every time I read it, I pick up on something different. And in John chapter 5, we meet a man who knows what it's like to feel stuck and trapped in something and to not have hope to move forward. So in John chapter 5, the Bible tells us that Jesus approaches this town. And in this town, there's this pool. And the belief is that if you are lame or sick or have some type of ailment, that at a certain time in the day, and they don't really never know when, an angel will come down and kind of stir the water. And when the angel stirs the water starts to bubble. And if you're the first person to get into this pool of water after that happens, then you'll be healed. Now, truth is, we have no historical evidence that this actually ever happened, but it was still something that people held on to and people would show up at this place. And so Jesus approaches this scene of these people putting their hope in something and in some ways kind of settling, hoping not that something else could come along, but just in this one belief system and this one idea. And in John chapter 5, the Bible tells us that Jesus approaches this scene and he sees a guy that's been there. And here's what it says in John chapter 5. It says, one who had been there, an invalid, for 38 years. So, pause. 38 years, this guy has been showing up to this same exact spot. That's not a season. That's not I hit a rough patch. That's a lifetime. 38 years of waiting, 38 years of disappointment, 38 years of watching other people move forward while he feels stuck. So imagine this man's daily routine. Being carried to the same place, laying on the same mat, watching the same water, hearing the same splashing, and seeing time and time again other people step ahead of him. And so what he started to do is what most of us would do. You show up, but you've started to lower your expectations. You've maybe started to lose a little bit of hope. Hope rising, then crashing. Hope rising, then crashing over and over again. John 5, 6-7 says, when Jesus saw him lying there and that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, do you want to get well? Now, this to me is just one of these kind of amazing details, okay? It seems really insensitive of Jesus, doesn't it? Like, dude's been laying there for 38 years, and Jesus is like, hey, bud, you want to get better? You know, and it's like there's this tension in this moment where like, what did you expect the guy to say? Like, what did you expect? But Jesus kind of knows what's going on because here's this guy. He's lowered his expectations. He keeps showing up because why not? He has nothing else to do. But like he doesn't believe. He's just sitting there in this moment, in this thing, laying on this mat day after day after day. And so the guy replies. He says, sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. And in this line, you know, I'm not making light of this guy because hopefully we'll meet him in heaven one day. There's a little bit of Eeyore in there. Remember Winnie the Pooh? A little bit of like, oh, yeah. But he's got an excuse. Like, and maybe it's a valid excuse. Like someone always gets ahead of me. And maybe we feel like that collectively or individually. Like we feel like, well, everybody else it's working out for them. And then here I am stuck here at this pool. And so he's got his excuse why he hasn't gotten better, why he hasn't changed, why he hasn't done it. And Jesus asked this question, do you want to get well? And the man answers. And he answers with history. I've tried. I've waited, I've hoped, but it never works out. That's what happens when hope has been disappointed too many times. You stop answering the question in front of you and start defending yourself with past experiences. I've tried. It didn't happen. And so I've lowered the expectations. I've lowered the bar. I've settled. This is just the way it is. It might be great for everybody else. It might work out for everybody else, but not for me. And there's something else that happens here that we don't often talk about. Sometimes after a long time, brokenness simply becomes familiar. And familiar almost always feels safer than the unknown. And we don't like to talk about that because you're like, why would anybody choose to be stuck there? And the reason you choose it is because it feels known. You kind of know what to expect. You kind of know what it's going to be like. And familiar feels safer than the unknown. It feels safer than stepping into the unknown. It feels safer sometimes than holding on to hope and believing that it could be better. It feels safer, right? This man had built his entire life around this condition. His routine, his identity, his expectations. His mat wasn't just something he laid on, it was something he lived on. And that happens to us too. We organize our life around our wounds. We manage our relationships around our fears. We make peace with patterns that may be slowly killing us. Not because we want to, but because they're familiar. It makes sense. It might look like chaos to everybody else, but it makes sense because it's familiar. And Jesus steps in and wants to disrupt all of that. He doesn't ask, how long has this been going on? He doesn't ask who hurt you. He doesn't ask, why haven't you tried harder or tried something different? He doesn't ask any of those questions. He simply looks at the man and says, do you want to get well? And here's the other thing that comes out of this. And it's going to be hard for some of us to hear, but it's the truth that I've learned in my own life and in a lot of people's lives that I've worked with over the years. Healing requires desire. Do you want to get better? And some people don't know how to answer that. So, here's this scene, all of this tension. Jesus looks at the man and says this, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. Like, go. Like, leave this. And at once, the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. Now, before there's a lot of pushback, I get this. It's just like the Paul example a couple weeks ago. Like, this doesn't happen every day. By the way, the Bible, the reason they're miracles is because they're not common, right? They're examples of God's power and what Jesus can do, but they're in there to show us that this doesn't just happen all the time. So these are these extraordinary stories, but the truths behind them still exist. A man has settled. He's lost in this place. And Jesus tells him to get up and to take his next step in light of everything that he's faced. Notice what Jesus doesn't do. He doesn't explain the process. He doesn't negotiate terms. He doesn't wait for perfect understanding from this man or from anybody else around him. He calls him forward. He says, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. In other words, for us, stop identifying with your condition. Stop letting your past define your future, and stop waiting for circumstances to change before you have the heart and the willingness and the hope to actually move. Hope always requires movement. Faith always requires the steps. And this man does something he hasn't done in 38 years. He stands. Now, there's another detail in the story that's always stuck out to me. So Jesus, he heals the man. It's this miraculous moment. It's this amazing thing. He calls him out from this and tells him to walk into something new. But he does something that to me is somewhat strange at first. He says to the man to pick up his mat and to walk. And the question that keeps coming back to me is, well, why does he got to pick up his mat? Like, forget the mat. Dude, Jesus, dude just walked for the first time in 38 years. Who cares about the mat at this point? Like, leave it. So why the mat? Well, it made me think. The mat represented everything about his old way. It was where he slept. It was where he waited, it was where he hoped, and it was where he had given up. The mat carried his story. It carried his disappointment, it carried his identity, it carried his reputation, it carried the way people recognized him. That's the guy on the mat. That's the man by the pool. That's the one who's been there for 38 years. The mat has become part of his identity. And Jesus doesn't want to heal him. He tells him to carry the very thing he used to live on, to pick it up. Jesus is saying to him, you're not who you used to be. You're not defined by where you've been. You're not stuck on the ground anymore. Pick up the mat. Don't lay on it. Don't go back to it. Don't build your life on it. Pick it up and carry it away. In other words, your story has changed. That mat, you don't need it anymore. So take it with you. Get rid of it. And here's why this is dangerous for some of us, okay? Some of us in this room, subconsciously, or maybe consciously, we want healing. We want things to get better. But we don't want to let go of the mat. We want freedom, but we also still want the excuses. We want restoration, but we still want the identity. We want a new life, but we keep living on the old story, and we keep going back to it time and time again. Going back to last week, if you missed it, this is those lies that we believed. So for some of us, it's not a physical mat like this guy. Here's our mat. That's just the way I am. Like it or don't, that's just the way I am. First of all, that's your excuse. Most people don't like you. Okay, just kidding. All right, you don't know what I've been through. You don't know what I've been through. Okay, I may not. This is just my personality. I've always struggled with this. I'll always be like this. And those are mats we keep going back to time and time again. Listen, your pain is real. Your story matters. Your wounds are valid. But you cannot build your future that God's calling to you living on the past. At some point, healing requires letting go of the identity that you're broken, that built around your brokenness. You can't live on the mat and carry it away at the same time. You either lay on it or you move forward with it as a proof that God has done. And maybe Jesus is inviting some of us to stand up and to carry the very thing you used to live on and carry it away. Get rid of it. You don't need it anymore. And that can be difficult. I think one of the most dangerous ideas in our culture, especially in faith, is the belief that God just wants us to be comfortable. God is not interested in managing your brokenness. He's interested in transforming our lives. Listen to what it says in 2 Corinthians 5:17. Paul wrote this. He said this, "If anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone. The new is here." The problem with some of us, if we're being honest, is we want the new, but we also don't want to let go of the old. It's become familiar. It's our identity. The old is how we make excuses for not becoming better. The old is what makes people feel sorry for us, not stepping into the new. But listen to what it says. It's a new creation, not improved, not upgraded, not patched up, actually new. God does not try to make your old life to where you can just be tolerated. He wants to replace it with something better. What is the promise that Jesus makes? I came to give you life and life to the full. Which means God never heals you so you can stay the same. He heals us so we can move forward. He heals us so we can start again. He redeems us so we can live differently. He forgives us so that we can forgive others, so that we can move forward, so we become better versions of ourselves. I said this a few weeks ago, and I believe it because I've seen it in my own life. We want God to make everything new, to make everything better, but not disrupt us too much. And the reality is, in my own life, so I'll speak for myself, I need things to be disrupted. Because if not, I'm going to keep going back to the mat. I'm going to keep going back to the old. I'm going to keep holding on. I'm going to keep making excuses. We want peace but not change. We want grace but not growth. We want forgiveness but not formation. But healing always calls us forward. I mean, notice this pattern when Jesus heals people and does these miraculous things. He'll say things to them like, go and sin no more. And we're like, yeah, but we became Christians so we can sin as much as we want. And we get forgiven, right? Nobody else? Y'all haven't found that loophole yet? Okay, just me? All right. So that's what we want, right? Or we say things like, he'll heal somebody, their life has changed, and he'll be like, go and show yourself. Go and show how your life has changed. Some of us are like, we're like closet Christians, right? Like, God's doing these amazing things. And then out there, like, nobody knows. He says, go and tell. Go and tell what I've done. Some of us are like, no, I'm good. I like showing up. I like coming into a dark room. Nobody knows me. Nobody sees me. It's good. But that was never the goal. Healing was never the end. It was always the beginning. God is not trying to return you to who you were before the pain. He's trying to create you into who we were always meant to be, which is why hope matters so much. Hope keeps you moving forward even when progress feels slow. Hope keeps you believing when change feels hard. Hope keeps you stepping when fear gets loud. Without hope, healing stalls, but with hope, transformation continues. And here's the other thing I've learned when it comes to hope and holding on to it in light of things we face. Most people think hope is just something you feel. They think hope just shows up one day. They think that hope arrives when the circumstances get better. They think hope comes when life finally works out. If life finally worked out for you, kudos to you, okay? But that's not how hope works. What I am learning, and I think the Bible is teaching us through these stories and what we're learning, is hope is actually a decision. Hope is actually a choice that you have to make to believe in it, to hold on to it. Hope is choosing to believe God is still working even when you can't see it. Hope is trusting before you feel it. Hope is stepping before certainty. Hope is praying before the answers. Listen to what it says in Hebrews chapter 10. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised it is faithful. We hold on to it. We choose to believe it. We choose to keep going back to it, not because of us. Notice what the verse doesn't say. It doesn't say hold on because you're strong, hold on because you're disciplined, hold on because you're consistent. It says hold on because God is faithful. Your hope is not in your performance. Your hope is not in your willpower. Your hope is not in your perfection, because none of us got that one. Your hope is in God who keeps his promises. Hope says, I don't see it, but I continue to trust him. Hope says, I don't feel it yet, but I still believe him. Hope says, I'm not there, but I do believe that I'm on my way. And those are choices. Hope is a daily choice. And here's what you have to know about hope in this choice. Sometimes it's loud. It's easy. It's easy to hold on to hope. And some days it's very quiet. Some days hope feels bold. And some days it's just a gentle whisper. But you have to choose it. Tomorrow we honor the life of a man that lived in our country that did amazing things for lots of people in our country, regardless of what anybody believes. And here's one of the quotes that comes from Martin Luther King Jr. We must accept finite disappointment. There will always be disappointment in life. And there will always be disappointment that works against the hope that you're working towards and the changes and the newness. But listen to what he says. But never lose infinite hope. Last week we talked about metamorphosis, and we talked about how this caterpillar becomes a butterfly. But the part we forget is this. So like it starts as this caterpillar that's like this kind of gross, weird thing that crawls around, and girls are like, ew, that's icky. And like you run over it in your car and all that stuff. And it starts as this weird little thing, and then it transforms into this thing that you're like, oh, it landed on my finger. Get a picture. But it's this weird thing like in between. And here's the part we forget. It doesn't become the weird little worm to the butterfly that we all want to get pictures with until it goes into the cocoon. And in the cocoon, here's what you have to know. Everything breaks down. The caterpillar dissolves. Its body restructures. Its form changes. And here's the thing. They're not that smart. But if I'm a caterpillar going through that, it looks like death. It feels like failure. It appears nothing is happening, and whatever is happening doesn't feel good, but it's actually transformation. And some of you are in a cocoon season right now. You're in the middle, you're waiting, you're in the slow, uncomfortable process, you're doing the work, you're showing up, you're trying, you're praying, and it feels like nothing is changing as quick as we would hope. And that is going back to National Quitters Day, why most of us quit. But listen to what Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 says. Let us not become weary, because there will be things that will make you feel weary in doing good. So don't stop. Keep showing up. Keep holding on. Keep believing. Keep choosing. For at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. So don't quit. Don't walk away in the middle. Don't stop in the middle. Don't give up when God is reshaping you. The cocoon, just like the healing, it is not the end. It's just the beginning. God is doing something, and we have to keep holding on to it. So let me ask us all a question. What have you been tempted to quit? Your faith? It's not going. You come to church, you're hoping it's going to get better, you're hoping it's going to click, but it's slow sometimes. Your recovery? Some people, we've made choices in our life, and we have this long journey, this long process we have to work through to come out on the other side. You've been tempted to quit. Your growth as a person, as a husband, as a wife, as a parent, as a brother, as a sister. Your healing, you've been through a lot. Nobody's discounting. Listen, I feel bad for the guy that laid there for 38 years. And he could have stayed there, but he chose not to. He answered the call of what Jesus called him to, and he got up and he walked. So what mats have you been laying on? What excuses have become too familiar in your life that you just always believe them? What label have you accepted about your story? What story have you been telling yourself or allowing other people to tell you that now you believe and identify yourself with? What if Jesus is standing in front of us right now and asking the question, do you want to get well? What will your answer be? At the end of Shawshank Redemption, I apologize if I ruined the movie for you. 31 years. I'm just going to keep that number out there. Red finally walks out of prison. It's just a powerful movie. If you haven't seen it, really, you should go see it, even the spoilers. He walks out of prison, and for the first time in a long time, there's no walls, there's no bars, there's no guards, there's no routines telling him when to eat, sleep, or move. He's free. But freedom feels strange. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about the guy that's been on the mat for 38 years that hasn't walked. I mean, it's got to feel weird to get up and walk places now, right? It's awesome, but it's completely different. And so there's got to be these weird emotions and feelings we don't know what to do with. And for some of us, it's not prison and it's not the mat. It's the actual idea that we've been this way for as long as we can remember. And now we're being called into something new and to something different. And let's be honest, it's got to feel a little bit strange. And just lost my sermon, so we're going to pray for each other real quick. Okay. But it does. It feels strange. You've been living behind walls and bars long enough, and now you don't know how to live without them. And so Red is out, but he's still carrying prison on the inside. He's still feeling overwhelmed. He's starting to feel tired, unsure, and he's afraid, and he doesn't know if he has it in him to start again. And for a moment, we see it, and he explains it. He thinks about quitting. Not going forward, not trying again, not hoping, just giving up. But then he remembers a promise that was made to him by his friend Andy, who never gave up hope. And in this movie, we see that Andy tells him about a place, a quiet place, a hopeful place, a place beyond the walls. It's a hayfield near Buxton, Maine. And he says, if you ever get out of prison, if you ever walk away from this, I need you to go to this field and find a tree. Andy remembers this promise that's made to him. Or Red remembers, and he goes. Not to quit, not to disappear, not to lose hope. And so Red gets on the bus. He follows the road. He walks into this field. He sits down by the tree, by the stone wall, and he finds the rock that Andy told him about. He pulls away the dirt underneath the rock, and he finds a letter from a friend who never gave up on him, from a friend who believed freedom was possible, and from someone who refused to let hope die. And in this letter, Andy reminds Red of the truth he tried to teach him all along. That even after prison, after all the loss, after all the pain, after all the disappointment, after all the years of waiting, hope is alive. And that hope isn't dangerous. That hope is something else. And Red opens the letter, and here are the words that Andy writes to him. Remember, Red, hope is a good thing. Maybe the best of things. And no good thing ever does. If you want to know what happens next, just go watch the movie. But here's the truth. Some of you walked in here today tired, discouraged, worn down. Some of you are standing in the middle of a season that feels like a prison. And God brought you here, just like Andy wrote the letter to Red, to remind you of a promise. Your story isn't over. Healing is still possible. Your future is still open, and the freedom is still ahead of you. You might feel like quitting. You might feel like giving up. You might feel like settling, but don't. Because hope is not only a good thing, it might be the best thing. That God is not finished with you, and it's not even close. Hope is what keeps you moving. Hope is what keeps you praying. Hope is what keeps you standing. Hope is what gets you off of the mat. And hope is what will lead you in the steps in the new direction. Never believe that God is not done writing your story. Don't quit. Choose hope. Because not only is it a good thing, it might simply be the best thing. Let's pray. Father God, we love you and we thank you. And God, I know that we walked in here, all of us in different seasons of life and different things going on and different things robbing us of hope, robbing us of the joy in our life right now and their circumstances, God. And maybe some of us, we relate to that. We feel trapped. We've tried over and over again, and because it doesn't work out, we don't always want to step into the new. God, it's hard to hold on to hope sometimes in light of the circumstances we face or family things that have happened that we faced or personal things in our lives. And so hope, we settle. We convince ourselves we don't need to change. We don't need to get better. We don't need to hold on to hope. We don't need to believe a better story is there. We don't need to believe that tomorrow can be better than yesterday because we've been crushed too many times. And maybe for us, God, it's just this moment where we just need to stop and to look up and to realize that you've been there the whole time and you're asking us a question that's painful and hard at times. But it's simple. Do you want to get well? Do you want to move forward? Do you want to walk again? Do you want to not be chained to these things, to live behind the bars and the walls of some of the prisons that we've made in our lives? Do we want to be well? God, my prayer is that we do, that we want that. My prayer is that we never give up on hope in light of what we're facing. God, in light of the circumstances, God, that we still hold on to hope. We choose to believe in hope. Every day we remind ourselves of hope, that there is a possibility of a better hour or a better night or a better tomorrow or a better week or a better year. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's not going to be processed or there's going to be disappointment or there's going to be things that bring us down, but we just never lose hope. We hold on to it. We keep believing it. And we keep turning to it. So God, whatever it is in our lives, in our hearts, in our minds right now, God, I pray in these next few moments as we sing, as we worship together, that still quiet voice reminds us that we are valued, that we're loved, that we're worthy. God, that you love us. God, you've never given up on us. You've never forsaken us. You've never abandoned us. And God, you want to walk us into a new season. You want to get us to get those mats out of there, to carry them away. God, that you're inviting us into something new. And so we love you and we thank you. In your son's name we pray. Amen.